Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. This is the fourth video in a series with Natalie Menten and myself regarding the 2023 Colorado property tax situation. In the third part, Natalie explained what mill levies and mill levy overrides are and how they affect your property tax bill. In this video, we'll be talking about which Colorado counties and properties are protected by the Taxpayer Bill of Rights TABOR and which ones are not. Well, Natalie, how are you on this fine July day?
Doing very well. Glad to be here. And tomatoes are finally looking good outside for everybody, I hope. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, perfect. Well, I want to kind of get started talking a little bit about a broad overview of TABOR, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. I'm sure most of our viewers, most people who are active in the Colorado Liberty community are very well versed on TABOR, but there's plenty of new people out there, plenty of people who are maybe just be kind of waking up to this political situation we find ourselves in. And, as we get closer to the November election, this can be a resource for people to really understand how important and valuable the Taxpayer Bill of Rights is. So the Colorado Constitutional Amendment, Article 10, this is from the Jefferson County website. The Taxpayers Bill of Rights, or TABOR, is an amendment to the Colorado Constitution enacted by voters in 1992 that limits the amount of revenue governments in Colorado can retain and spend, including the state, counties, which is what we're talking about today, cities, schools, and special districts. Limiting how much total revenue can be received by these local governments each year can have different effects on their budgets. So you can kind of see the Jefferson County website frames the argument. Of course, they don't like TABOR. Most counties, most government entities really oppose the Taxpayer Bill of Rights because they want more of your money. They want to take money out of your paycheck, money away from your families, money out of your community for their own government special projects. And that's why TABOR, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, is so valuable because it keeps that money in your pocket, the person who earned it, keeps it for your family and in your community.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing. 30 years now and allowing moderate growth for government, which is what we want.
Definitely. It's one of the main reasons why Colorado's as free as it is. I have the website Free State Colorado, and I get a little bit of criticism from people who say Colorado's not free, it's becoming California. But I would have to say the Taxpayer Bill of Rights is one of the reasons we have as much freedom as we do.
And why we're here tonight spreading the word of freedom, right?
Exactly, exactly. So this is also from the Jefferson County website here. This is kind of their description about the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. So they say TABOR requires excess revenue to be refunded to taxpayers. So of course, excess revenue is a very broad term. It's kind of a politically charged term. You're going to hear that a lot on ballot initiatives, as you have probably in the past, and as you'll probably see on this year's ballot. But here's what they say. If the total revenue collected by the state or local government exceeds the TABOR limit in any given year, both the overall revenue and property tax revenue, then that excess amount must be refunded to taxpayers the following fiscal year. However, the Constitution allows lawmakers and local officials to determine how to return the money. Examples of different refund methods have included a credit to the following year's property tax bill, a temporary adjustment to the mill levy, or a refund check. So the state constitution under TABOR limits how much government can keep, how much money government can keep from the taxpayers, and then the rest goes back to the people. So it's a great mechanism to just like you said, slow down the growth of government and ensure that our economy and our hardworking families have more money in their paychecks and pocketbooks.
Yeah, and it allows sustainable growth because if government grows too fast, we can't support it. Yep.
So here's getting into what these counties and what these anti-TABOR activists are pushing for. So TABOR enables voters to forego refunds of excess revenue. So this means state and local governments can seek approval from the voters to allow excess revenue to be retained and spent. The action is commonly known as debrucing, referring to Douglas Bruce, the principal architect of the TABOR Amendment. Debrucing is a commonly misunderstood term. Now, this is according to Jefferson County. Debrucing is not something that applies to a government. It is something that applies to excess revenue. And a government cannot simply opt out of TABOR by debrucing. TABOR is part of the Colorado Constitution, and state and local governments do not have the authority to bypass the supreme law of the land. Instead, debrucing is a broad form of voter approval to allow the state and local governments to keep revenue in excess of TABOR limitations.
Yeah, and it's worth noting there's language within TABOR that expresses some details about 4-year period, 4-year delay. And that was meant to limit that choice when voters say, yes, the government can keep the excess revenue, to allow that for 4 years, but not past that period of time, not forever. The courts have misinterpreted that, but it is worth noting that that was the intent, and the author's still alive. So if anybody challenges that or has doubts, they can clearly get the answer, since the author is still willing and very capable of speaking about what was the intent.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there is definitely a lot of misinterpretation. I'd say some of it in bad faith, misinterpreting things intentionally to try and keep more of our money, right? So, debrucing is a term you might hear in some of the media articles as we get closer to November, but it's a general idea that these counties have that they deserve your money more than you do. So this is from an authoritarian organization that is totally anti-Tabor, but this is a great map. This is the debruced Colorado counties. So unfortunately, over the years, most of Colorado counties have given up their rights to keep the money that they've earned. So 51 out of the 64 counties in the state, and 230 out of the 274 municipalities, and 177 out of 178 school districts have debruced since Tabor's inception in 1992. Now, of course, there's a little bit of controversy over some of these counties. Some of the ballot language didn't totally debruce, but of course, they want to count it as a debruced county anyway. But it is interesting to note that it's very unfortunate that actual Colorado voters, maybe mistakenly in some cases, or maybe even most cases, have given up their rights under the Taxpayer Bill of Rights.
Well, and a lot of it happened early on, within 4 years, about after Tabor was passed. And I think a lot of that was even more confusion about what people were doing when they voted yes on something. Now you ask people about Tabor, a lot more of the population knows, but we still have a lot of education to do. But back then, they didn't understand what they were giving away forever. And I hope, but first should be noted, you can voters, they can reverse that one way or another, whether it's pressure or initiative or something else. But just wanted to point out, especially it was early on where a lot of them gave it away. And I think a lot of now voters would just say, no, I'm not going to do that, when we see that in some of the election results.
Definitely. And as we've seen, the hype last year around the rebate checks that people were getting across the state with a nice little campaign letter written by the governor, basically taking credit for the Tabor rebates that people received in the mail during, kind of a tough economic time over the last several years. And it's very unfortunate to see these same politicians now come out against Tabor refunds and try and keep that money for themselves.
Great.
So if you don't know these counties by name, then we have them listed right here. So there's 13 counties then that still have Tabor protections, and there might be some other counties that have some level of Tabor protections that aren't fully debruced, I guess, as you'd say. So we have Arapahoe, Broomfield, Delta, El Paso, Elbert, Gilpin, Jefferson, Mesa, Montrose, Park, Pueblo, Route, and Weld. So for those of you who are maybe just moving to the state of Colorado or looking for a place to relocate that is a little bit more liberty oriented, here's some choices for you.
Yes. And if you'd like to get involved in local ballot issues, I know at least two of those counties on the list are right now scoping out putting something on the ballot. So I know in Jefferson County's case, enough that they're getting ready to have leaning towards hiring a political consultant to help them. And Arapahoe is also making noise. So I'm glad to have that list up there, because then people can especially keep an eye out, since you aren't guaranteed that the government won't be in the works trying to do something to take your refunds away right now.
Right, right. I mean, it's interesting to see how these counties have been some of the fastest growing or most economically prosperous because, the people have been able to keep their money, the businesses have been able to keep their money in the community, and it has slowed the growth of government in so many ways.
Yeah, and it's just today I've got to throw this in, looking at Arapahoe County and their comprehensive report, and looking at it and just the smiling, because right within there it was said we've had Tabor excess money that's got to go back to taxpayers, and we've adjusted property taxes down because of the Taxpayers Bill of Rights. So between $750 or $1,500 check last year and then thanks to Taxpayers Bill of Rights, and now counties that if we spotlight more that they're reducing taxes due to TABOR, it all the more draws to that appreciation and that people getting very vested in trying to protect TABOR if they've got it, or as I said before, going to reestablish. So go ahead. I'll let you go to
Yeah,
the next.
no, I'm just going to say if you believe in liberty and freedom, then I'd say it's paramount to, if you're in one of these counties, to really do everything you can to have create an organized effort to defend the TABOR restrictions in the county, or the TABOR limitations on the revenue collection of the county government. And if you're not in these counties, then it's something to aspire to get back to that level.
Yeah.
So here's kind of a breakdown. There's the CCI, the Colorado Counties Incorporated, which is a pro-government lobbyist organization that doesn't like TABOR that much, but they have a list here kind of showing pretty interesting, if you're interested in your county, specifically how the money was taken or how the county was debruced. So, for example, here in Adams County in 2002, they had ballot language that said, quote, collect, retain, and spend all revenues and other funds received from any source, end quote. So that's some of those magic words that you really got to be careful when the ballots come around, what you're looking for. Anything that says, collect, retain, and expend, or spend your revenue, that's something we see over and over the years, where these counties are basically asking voter permission under the law to keep that money for themselves.
Yeah, and especially with ballot language that we see over and over, and that is it's stating to be able to retain money above if you're lucky, you get Article 10, Section 20, but they may say a voter approved revenue change, but then also the last part of the sentence, and any other law. And so when it's referencing that any other law, it's referencing that middle column on that chart you have listed there, which is about waiving the 5.5 cap, which you and I have talked about multiple times before, I know, because I love to educate people on that. As an example, in Arapahoe County, where they're talking about they'll have an upcoming TABOR limit on the revenue they can keep, it's actually because of inflation, the lower limit will be the 5.5 cap, which is reasonable, I believe. So anyway, just wanted to point out that language that keeps appearing on the ballots continues to be a problem. And that whole process needs to be addressed. But I know we don't have any time to go into that tonight about how to get involved with how does it frame those questions? What is transparency in ballot language? And why are there two sets of rules? The government gets to frame the question the way they want. And when a citizen initiative does it, they have to go before that title board and be at the mercy of whatever the title board determines. Now, frankly, can have at times very fair rulings from that board, but also on the other hand, that they are working for the government, so they may not be as invested in being the pro-citizen point of view when the question's put together. That's a really, really important thing. That's why it draws even more importance to, I'm going off a little bit on here on the blue book involvement and then the gray book involvement. And I don't know that we've covered that recently. I don't think we have, but for future, that's part of that, where it gives at least a little more information to voters, so they're not giving away their rights like the multitude of counties who gave away rights in theory with a court misruling to gave away the rights of all future generations. And I mean, that's why the author of Taxpayers Bill of Rights put that 4-year limit in there, because it coincides with a 4-year term. And you're not giving away the rights of future generations. So, all right, I'll let you keep going though.
No, it is definitely. I mean, one of the big points there is it is a rigged game in terms of deciding ballot language, where the government, of course, the state has the opportunity to frame questions more in line with what they're trying to accomplish with the ballot initiative or the ballot question or the proposition that they're putting to voters, where citizen activists don't necessarily have that same capability for sure.
Yeah.
So here's from Jefferson County. This is from that CCI online website again, but I wanted to kind of illustrate here. I thought it was pretty interesting to see some of the county ballot issues on TABOR from 1993 to 2022. So it kind of breaks down some of the different opportunities for voters to stand up in defense of their taxpayer bill of rights. but also other times when state actors or pro-government activists have tried to take away those TABOR protections. So this resource is available on that website listed there. Remember that website, of course, that organization is anti-TABOR. They want to take your tax money away, and that's a big battle that continues to face us here in Colorado. But nonetheless, it's important to understand all these attempts by these pro-government actors to take away our rights.
Yeah, and this, what's disappointing, real short, is that we, the taxpayers, through our county, pay the dues to CCI Online or the other organization that's out there, the alternative, which is, I think, CCAT. But that's our taxpayer money that pays the dues, and that could be thousands of dollars. So they can provide a valuable resource. But on the other hand, when they are not 100% like the lobbyist for the citizen, they're wearing a hat, lobbyist for the government. If it was lobbyist for the citizen, that would be great. But those are actually quite limited compared to the amount of government lobbyists that are out there.
Well, and I think it's important too to recognize, every year it seems like a small ask is given to the voters, right? Hey, only increase the mill levy by this much, only increase the percentages by just this much. But if you look over decades, over 30 years that TABOR's been in law, it adds up, and enough is enough. They don't need much more of our taxpayer money, if any, in my mind, they don't need any of it, and they should be giving it back to us, is what I think. But it is interesting to see how, hey, you got to help the firefighters. Hey, you got to help the schools. Hey, you got to help the roads. Hey, all of a sudden, after so many years, that's all our money's eaten up.
Yeah, it's like a city. Well, I won't go down that road, but why they need to increase the rate when cost of goods continues to grow, volume grows. Why do you actually need to increase rates when especially Denver, Colorado has a good economy partly because of TABOR, frankly,
Yeah.
but that's an increase in revenue. So it's just like government's crying. Got to go into this for a sec. We've got to make a tax cut. No, you don't have to make a tax cut. You had, let's say, 100, let's say $10 million extra revenue, and TABOR's going to allow you to grow certain amounts of millions up to that reasonable point, and the rest has to be refunded. And the government calls that a cut, just like almost the property tax increase. A decrease in the overall increase is not true relief. I mean, it's governments like to phrase it and are able to use between the lobbyists that they've got, plus the PR, especially if they can line it up before a ballot issue becomes formally a ballot issue. Unfortunately, governments in a lot of sense are just using our tax money to run campaigns, to take money out of our pocket. And if it's one thing, if they just put the ask on the ballot and sit back, provide the data, but when they're actively engaged in lobbying and using websites, social media, lobbyists, PR firms to message to us, anyway, I'm going off track there. I'll
No, it's a
stop.
great. Hey, no, it's a great point. I'm glad you brought it up because it's another avenue for liberty activists, for the liberty community to focus on as well, is to, limit the government's ability to try and use their propaganda techniques to push these ballot initiatives that are going to make life more expensive and benefit them at the expense of us, right?
Yeah, and that's one good reason why it's always good if your county doesn't do it. Like Jeffco used to do this, and they changed about a year and a half, 2 years ago, is to demand that they put the check register online, because
Mm.
you can do open record requests all day long. The greatest thing for transparency is a check register. It all boils down to money is power, right? So if you see where they're spending the money, and go into mission creep, got these governments that go, we can't afford to do this with the roads, da da da. But you look at the amount of programs that they've added on, then you go, well, you know what? That's because you don't have the priorities straight. And the check register is a great way. So like if there's building a campaign, how much did you spend? Did you spend money on polling? Did you spend money on a PR strategic firm? Anyway, I have a great passion for government check register transparency.
Wonderful. We'll have to get into that sometime.
Yes.
Perfect. Next slide here. From looking at Jefferson County again, I think it's really important to recognize how valuable TABOR is in terms of like you said, making our economy strong, stimulating our economy, and keeping money in our local businesses and our local families and our local community. So in 2022, this $17.3 million was refunded back to Jefferson County taxpayers. There was 213,163 checks were sent out over this $17.3 million. I mean, that's a massive influx of money that was in the economy, was taken out through taxes and got to go back in. So, I mean, what a huge benefit this is to keeping our economy strong and really, like you said, limiting the size and growth of government.
I agree. Proud to live in one of the more than a dozen counties that still has our TABOR.
Looking into 2023, so looking at what's potentially going to be there in the future for Jefferson County. So based on the estimated 2022 TABOR revenue limit, approximately $25 million in excess revenue will be refunded in 2023. So huge. So $17 million this last cycle, now another 25 million coming back into the economy. So huge benefit. And of course, this is why these pro-government actors, these government people, want to keep that money for themselves. Of course, they hate having to give us our tax money back. So let's talk a little bit about this 5.5% property tax revenue limit, the annual levy law. Now, we did talk about this before, but Natalie, you pointed to this website, the DOLA, the Colorado Department of Local Affairs, so dola.colorado.gov. You can actually go in there and look up all the local governments and see which ones are restricted by this 5.5% property tax revenue limit and which ones are not. So your notes here say, once you use the alphabetic lookup to find your local property tax jurisdictions, check the 2022 and 2023 limit column. If the DLG 53 form is present, that jurisdiction likely is still regulated by the 5.5% annual mill levy cap. An important note, home rule municipalities, taxpayers don't get 5.5% cap protections, so you'll see all of those listed as exempt. Now, if it says waived, that means the voters waived rights, but unfortunately, there's a notable amount of special districts where the developers were the only voters in place when the district formed, so they waive it right away and give away the rights of future property owners before they even move into the new home.
Yes. And with special districts with property taxes, that could make a big difference on your bill. Big difference.
Right. And that's something to remember too. You know, there's all these small little chipping away at your bills, your property tax bills. So there's lots of little places where they try and take it here and there. So really keeping that 5.5% property tax revenue limit, this annual levy law in place is very important. And then also making sure you have the TABOR protections in your local community as well.
Yes.
So I thought this was interesting. So looking at that DOLA website, looking at all the different governments that Jefferson County taxpayers are on the hook for, I mean, there's 231 local governments. I mean, absolutely crazy to think in one county, there's so many local governments. Of course, this ranges from everything from cities like Arvada to water and sanitation districts like the Bear Creek one. And then, of course, all these metropolitan districts that are all over the map.
Yeah, and statewide, we're at roughly 3,000 local governments. So it's lots of layers, because on a property tax bill, you might have minimum 3 or 4 of these districts, but potentially up to several.
Definitely. So you mentioned earlier the annual comprehensive financial report. So just a quick Google description of what that is, according to Wikipedia, it says a comprehensive annual financial report is compiled by a state, municipal, or other governmental accounting staff and audited by an external American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, certified accounting firm utilizing these requirements. So every county in Colorado, if I'm not mistaken, would have one of these comprehensive annual financial reports. You referenced the Arapahoe County one earlier, so here it is right here. You can find it there. Of course, your county has one. It's a very interesting. If you have an interest in local government, maybe you're running for office, you want to be a county treasurer, county commissioner, or even at the local level as a city councilor, this is something that could be very useful as a tool to see where this tax money is being spent, to see the priorities of this county government, and maybe where the fat can be trimmed. Maybe where these cuts can be made to restore some sanity and restore some sense of balance to the local community and take away these government resources that are used so poorly in many cases.
Yeah, and it would be for counties. I know you're going to go into that in a moment here, but for counties, municipalities, RTD, special districts, a very uniform document that local governments, state of Colorado will have. And it's that single year look back, but it expands beyond that. And it's a really helpful document. And budgets look in the future. As we called it CAFR, is more of that look back and gives you those hard figures, what they actually did. So really helpful. So I know you're going to go into a little bit more exactly why they provide a lot of info.
Yeah, so that you had referenced this earlier. So this is that Arapahoe County one from 2022. So of course, as you may expect, I'll read a little bit, some highlights here, but this is that preparing for the future section where it says property tax is the largest source of revenue to the county, comprising 45% of overall county revenues. So of course, this is why property tax is one of the biggest issues out there because this is how the county governments fund themselves, of course. So it says for 2023, the county's property tax revenue growth limit would normally be the sum of an estimated inflation for the Denver metro area plus the growth of new construction during the previous calendar year, as restricted by the provisions of TABOR. However, due to the very high inflation rate of the county, it finds itself limited by the 5.5% statutory property tax revenue limitation, which restricts the growth in local government revenue to no more than 5.5% over the prior year, allowing for new construction and other factors. So it's interesting to see TABOR and the 5.5% statutory limit kind of working hand in hand to restrict this growth of government. So skipping down to the second paragraph here, it says, well, let's do this last line first. Additionally, the major impact of TABOR is that the county may not be able to retain all the property tax revenue it could collect. So that's great for taxpayers, great for property owners, right? Due to the provisions of TABOR and applying the most restrictive revenue limit, the county's property tax revenue growth from 22 to 23 is projected to be 9%, which is the sum of the estimated inflation of the 7.73% and new construction growth of 1.28%. So this is compared to a taxable value decline of 0.5%. The result is a reduction in the temporary tax credit to 3.15 mils that is estimated to be provided to taxpayers to adjust for the portion. Well, anyways, it continues there. But what's very interesting, as we'll see here, is that they actually, in order to meet the goals, the restrictions that are placed upon them, Arapahoe County actually had to lower the mill levy, like you said. So looking here, this last line I highlighted, this is also from that same report. A temporary tax credit of 3.15 mils was also applied to keep property tax revenue within the limits required by law under the Taxpayers Bill of Rights. So of course, the annual levy law plus TABOR really work well to keep the property taxes lower as it did in Arapahoe County. So, when you think about it, if you live in Arapahoe County or some of these other counties, especially obviously the ones that have not debruced, as they say, then you really have to thank TABOR and the annual levy law to keep your property taxes lower than they otherwise would be.
Yeah, and the beauty of it is didn't even have to go down and testify and lobby for it. TABOR's like that 24/7 guardian.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's something that kind of set in motion and then it does its work for us in the community. So the big takeaway from that, looking at the Arapahoe County report there, is that counties can lower your property taxes by reducing the mill levy. You do not need to give up your TABOR rebates. So that's one of the biggest messages going forward. Like Proposition HH is what, and we know that's not going to be the end of it. We're going to see this continue to go on for years to come, where these politicians are going to keep lying to the public by telling them you need to give up your TABOR rebates if you want lower property taxes. Well, that is absolutely false. What you need to do is make sure your county has TABOR and your county and your local governments have the TABOR protections in place. Make sure that annual levy law is in place, and then maybe work to expand them.
That's exactly right.
And then on top of that, just do everything you can to reduce that mill levy. Go in and get involved and do what you can. Maybe get some activists together to really push for lower property taxes. So,
yeah, and I can speak to just over the last week. I've had to listen. I've quite a few government meetings, and in those, there are public comment. There are very few people who are speaking up about it. While that may sound like a little bit daunting on getting the job done that way, the other view of that is just having 1, 2, or 3 or 4 people speak up during a public comment with a focus on reducing property taxes is like a huge statement, because these elected bodies really aren't hearing from the public. They might have the one person who comes and says something about it, but The point being, they really don't get a lot of public comment. If two, three people, just your neighbors, you, Fred, Cake, we can write a letter. It's really surprising. Most people kind of think probably there's a disconnect. The elected and they're getting overwhelming amount of public comment. In a lot of cases, that's not true. You can have a lot of impact for just minimal effort.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, the impact could be huge, like you said, for very little cost, really. And what's interesting too in this whole conversation, something that strikes me is just how many places were being nickel and dimed, or how many times were being nickel and dimed as proper if you're a property owner, all these different places taking your money, and the lack of accountability too, because hey, there all these little special districts, all these different organizations just take here and there, and they kind of escape some of that scrutiny that maybe a larger government would have, like the county government itself, the city government, of course, the state. These smaller local governments, these hundreds of them that exist in each county, can kind of skate by in some of these levels, these special districts, and take your money, and you really don't know where it's going, what they're using it for. And, it'd probably be very interesting to look to deep dive into what this money is going to be spent for, and kind of how these property tax owners maybe aren't getting the best value for their money.
Yeah. And that's where transparency really plays in with having a check register online, not only for counties, but even special districts. Think about most accounting programs, you can export it to a spreadsheet, a PDF, not preferable, but I mean, I doubt they're doing it on old paper and old, huge, old green, like accounting book these days. And so, export the file. And if it's not on the government site, then do a public information request and ask for it. I just had somebody today who's looking into a certain county and wanted to know the best way to go about it. And I gave them the template for the language, which I've used many times, to get the right data set. And all comes down to accountability. Well, how are you spending the money on? Show us the bucks before you even go to a ballot, you know?
Oh, it's a great point. That's a great point. And this is really an incredible opportunity we have these days for individuals to get involved, to speak up, to stand up, and get involved in your local governments. There's so many opportunities. You don't have to go down to the state legislature. Love to see you there. I love going down there myself, but you can get involved in these local discussions at the most local level possible. So, Natalie, thank you so much for your time today. I think this is valuable information for people to really understand the impact that TABOR and the levy law has in their local counties, and how important it is to defend it, especially if you're in one of those 13 counties.
Great. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Anything closing comments?
No, I know we've got future episodes, and we'll leave it at tonight with quite a bit of ways that people can figure out more about what they've got to deal with and how to make a change. So we'll leave it at that and hope everybody has a great night.
Wonderful. Well, all the links will be at freestatecolorado.com, as well as all of the series that we've been doing. This is part 4. So check out the other parts and more to come as we get closer to the November election. So thank you very much for tuning in.
Good night.